In a world overrun with the fake, delusional, and disingenuous, he stands as a beacon of truth. He is Abuki Cabal. You are listening to Abuki Cabal.
Welcome to the Abuki Cabal Show.
What's going on, everybody? I want to thank everybody for supporting the previous stream and just for the general support and helping me to grow my channel. Hopefully I'm covering some pretty decent topics that at least make you think about the way in which things are progressing, you know, things that we see from time to time and even more frequently now, and some of the agendas behind them. This one is one of the ones that I've been kind of interested in for a while here. And it's what I like to call, I use terraforming quite a bit, but things are being terraformed for to be a more suitable environment for those who are trying to take over that environment, i.e. women, feminist black women, these people who are trying to rewrite history. And this one deals with the terraforming of history in order to draw more focus on to people who are deemed to be marginalized by some, because they don't feel that the contributions of these smaller communities, these marginalized within the marginalized communities, didn't get enough focus. So we're going to cover some of that. But first, we've got to go back in time. All right. So, again, if you haven't, hit that like, share, and subscribe button. Go ahead and hit that notification button. And but tonight we're going to look into this new focus on the supposed omission of black women's deaths via lynchings throughout the history of lynchings. And we're going to start with this article here. So here we go.
History focuses on men, but black women were lynched, too, by Jordan Shepard. The Howard Center for Investigative Journalism. It was a Sunday morning, July 12, 1914. The woman had been in the Ellery, South Carolina, jailhouse since the night before. Soon, a mob would come, put her in a waiting automobile, hang her from a tree and shoot her to death. 2 days later, the local newspaper, The Times and Democrat in Orangeburg, delivered its account under the headline "Lynching Caused by Brutal Murder." The Negro woman and her sister were suspected of knowing about the disappearance of a 12-year-old white girl and were arrested Saturday night and taken to the jail for safekeeping. On Sunday morning, after searchers found little Essie Bell's bloody, mutilated body lying near a large oak tree, the mob converged on the one-story, reddish brick jailhouse and took Rosa Richardson, the alleged assassin. She confessed, the newspaper reported, with contradictory statements on whether she gave a motive. The mob hanged her from a tree and fired multiple shots into her body, the penalty for the cruel and brute-like murder of the child. Afterwards, the negress brute was left hanging, deceased, her body mutilated with bullets. Rosa Richardson is the only documented case of a black woman being lynched in Orangeburg County, South Carolina. according to an analysis by the Howard Center for Investigative Journalism at the University of Maryland. 9 black women were lynched in the state. Between 1865 and 1965, there were nearly 5,000 racial terror lynchings of black people. According to a Howard Center analysis of the Bechtold Inventory of Southern Lynch Victims and the Seguin-Rigby National Dataset of Lynchings in the United States, approximately 120 of those victims, about 3%, were black women. Recorded history focuses primarily on black male victims, in part because of the false rationale for lynchings, said Evelyn Simeon, a University of Connecticut professor and author of Gender and Lynching, The Politics of Memory. The master narrative focuses on this great lynch myth that suggests black men rape white women, for which they stood accused and were tortured and mutilated by lynch mobs, Simeon said. Maria de Longoria, who wrote part of her doctoral dissertation on the Richardson case, agreed. It's about the racial assumptions and the gender assumptions. It's not about black men being sexual predators. If you're also lynching black women, said de Longoria, an associate professor at Medgar Evers College of the City University of New York. Today, the term used is intersectionality. It explains how factors including race, gender, and class are connected when it comes to discrimination. They don't have whiteness and they don't have a higher socioeconomic status for which to protect them from death, or humiliation or rape, said Simeon, who also noted that black women's roles played into some of the accusations. Black women are typically working as domestics, and so they stood accused of poisoning, murder, theft in the household. Richardson was born in 1887, in South Carolina, according to the 1910 U.S. Census, and was 23 years old that year. The Times and Democrat said she was 35 when she died, but the 1910 census record indicates she would have been 27. The census record also reported that she was single and had no children. Her sister's name was Alice, according to de Longoria, who researched the case and talked to local residents in 2004 and 2005. Many newspapers have her listed under additional names: Rosa Carson, Rose Carson, Reza Carson, and Rosa Jefferson. In their book Lynched, The Victims of Southern Mob Violence, Amy Kate Bailey, associate professor at the University of Illinois at Chicago, and Stuart E. Tolle, professor emeritus at the University of Washington, wrote that victims' names sometimes appear differently because reporters obtained them from a variety of sources. Historians were unable to identify about 1 in 5 black women victims by name, according to a Howard Center analysis. Richardson worked for the Bell family, according to the Times and Democrat. As he went missing July 11, after her father, Daniel Bell, a highly respected farmer, sent her out to graze the family cow, the newspaper reported. A slight fuss days prior between Richardson and Mrs. Bell made Essie's parents suspect Richardson. Richardson and her sister were arrested and, when questioned, Richardson told a series of disconnected stories, according to the Times and Democrat, which made her more of a suspect. As the search continued, the party tracked footprints from Richardson's home to the scene of the crime and determined that she was guilty. The search party turned into a mob and headed for Richardson. The Times and Democrat did not report the size of the mob, but the Chicago Defender, a prominent black newspaper, reported that the mob numbered more than 150 people. Law enforcement officers and several citizens of Ellery attempted to protect Richardson but were held at gunpoint by 6 shooters, the Times and Democrat reported. The Columbia Record, an evening newspaper in Columbia, South Carolina, reported that her sister, Alice, told the mob that Richardson had confessed. After that, there is no reporting on what happened to Alice. The Columbia Record also reported that Richardson was hanged from her arms, maintained an excellent composure, and showed no signs of breaking down before being shot through the right breast with a shotgun. She was lynched almost directly in front of her own home. The Times and Democrat reported that 30 Negroes were in attendance, watching. They would have fired the volley if permitted, and went to console the grief-stricken family, the newspaper reported. African Americans have a history of donning a mask, showing one face to white people out of sheer necessity to survive the next day, Simeon said. And so that's what really comes to mind when I hear what these black people were saying, that they would have participated in the woman's victimization, torture and lynching. I can't help but believe they're saying what white folks wanted them to say. The Times and Democrat reported that no arrests were made and it was unclear who was a part of the mob. The Times and Democrat of 1914 reflected how some white-owned newspapers of the time covered lynchings. Richardson's death was printed on the last page of the newspaper's 4-page edition of July 14, 1914. Narratives similar to that coverage were printed in papers across the state, such as the Newbury Weekly Herald, the Lawrence Advertiser, and Union Times. White-owned newspapers sometimes vilified black men and women, calling them fiends and brutes, and accusing them of having bad character or a case of temporary insanity. As Richardson was described by the Times and Democrat, the paper called Richardson a negress brute. The Columbia Record reported she was one of the worst Negroes of the vicinity. African American newspapers that covered Richardson's murder, such as the Appeal in St. Paul, Minnesota, the Chicago Defender, and the New York Age, delivered a different type of coverage. The Defender referred to her as Mrs. Rosa Carson and put the story on its front page. Both the Defender and the New York Age condemned the lynching and criticized those involved. The Appeal criticized the African Americans who were there, saying it was a shame and disgrace to the race that they failed to give their lives to stop the lynching of one of their women. In 1914, the manager of the Times and Democrat was James Isler Sims. His brothers, Hugo Sheridan Sims and Henry Radcliffe Sims, were the editors. Today, the paper is owned by Lee Enterprises, and the editor is Lee Harder, who has held that position for the past 40 years. When asked if the paper has reviewed its past coverage, he said, "I think we've constantly evaluated how we do things over the years in a definite effort to strive for fairness. That's been sort of my life's mission." Harder said he's seen a change in the amount and type of coverage of the black community. In Orangeburg, South Carolina, blacks are not a minority. They are the definite majority, he said. So, you're going to have, by nature of what people are doing, if we're reporting on people and community, we're going to be reporting on black people. In 2012, with the help of historian Richard Reed, the paper revisited the 1914 report of the Richardson case for its Black History Month series. In the introduction, Reed pointed out that the lynching provided a strange twist to the norm of lynching black men. De Longoria said black men and women often were killed for the same reasons. They were both lynched for doing things they weren't supposed to do, she said. Opening their mouths in some way, or trying to earn a living, or pushing back against the system, or not knowing their place. Today, with movements such as #SayHerName, there is still a fight to showcase that black women are also victims of police brutality and racial violence. At the 2016 TED Women Conference, law professor Kimberly Crenshaw offered a reason. Crenshaw, who coined the term intersectionality in 1989, explained that frames do not exist that would allow many to understand the victimization of black women. These women's names have slipped through our consciousness because there are no frames for us to see them, no frames for us to remember them, no frames for us to hold them, Crenshaw said in her speech. As a consequence, reporters don't lead with them, policymakers don't think about them, and politicians aren't encouraged or demanded that they speak to them. This story was written and reported by the Howard Center for Investigative Journalism, and it is part of a larger series investigating how white-owned newspapers incited racial terror.
Okay. Pretty good article, don't you think? I got a few things I want to, a few issues I have with it. Where they talk about racial and gender assumptions. Okay. Let me go back to that, see if I can find that. Sorry, guys. Okay, well, I'll go on back. I'll just go on up here and we'll deal with this right here. Where one of the first things where you see here is that there were, from 1865 to 1965, there were nearly 5,000 racial terror lynchings of black people. Okay, but black people is not good enough when dealing with this these horrific events. So we have to further break it down to the number of women, black women, who were basically lynched, in order to give them further focus. Excuse me. So they do that. So they look at the data, and out of that 5,000, which were mostly black men, 120 of those victims, about 3% were black women. Okay. Now, the reason why that's important is simply this. I mean, if you look at any time casualties of any kind are recorded, they are given in total, as if the sacrifice is judged based off of the total number of individuals who were victimized by or killed in a war, or whatever the case may be. But here in recent times, we're starting to try to break these things down to how many black women were killed, how many white women were killed, how many LGBTQ were killed, so that everybody gets a piece of notoriety off of the death. It's not good enough for you to say that black people were lynched. You have to say black women were lynched too. Black LGBTs were lynched too. You have to say these things, and this further segmentation where you have people of color, and then real black people, and then Indian people, and I mean it's to the point to where it's so broken down that it makes it less important to me. They didn't care that you were a woman or that you were gay or any of that stuff. They cared that you were black, and the terroristic behavior was done in order to keep all black folks in line. That was the reason for it. And this tactic has been used throughout history, to keep people in line. But for some reason, feminists and black feminists have tried to. No, there's no some reason to it. We all know the reasons to it. Is to basically put further focus on black women and take more focus away from black men. I'll get into that a little bit more later, but let's move on. Okay. That goes further into this racial and gender assumptions. Nobody really gave a shit about your gender or any of that. It was more so that you were black. If your gender came into play and you were black, even more so, they would do things to you. But the reasons for this was it's talked about in this article. Let's see. All right, we get into the numbers again. And here it says, recorded history focuses primarily on the black male victims, in part because of a false rationale for lynchings, said Evelyn Simeon, University of Connecticut professor, and author of Gender and Lynching, Okay. The master narrative focuses on the great lynch myth that suggests black men rape white women, for which they stood accused and were tortured and mutilated by lynch mobs. And we all know that to be true, and that was the predominant reason that most of these men were lynched. The other reasons were, if you were trying to act white, or you were not in your place, you got uppity, you had money, you had property, anything that a black man had that white men wanted or felt like they shouldn't have, it was cause for lynching. So we'll move on here. And here's the part where she says it's about racial assumptions and gender assumptions. It's not about black men being sexual predators. If you're also lynching black women, said Ellen Goy. No, I don't think that it's about racial or gender assumptions. One thing that you can say about this is that, look, no one, people were upset. Black people were upset about their men and their boys being murdered and drowned, and any number of atrocities committed against these men and boys. There was outrage for that, but black women came and, i.e. Ida B. Wells, came out and tried to put a focus on that. She was only one, Billie Holiday also, her song "Strange Fruit" was all about that. It brought a focus on it. And one of the main reasons why police hated her so much is because she brought a focus on things that you're not supposed to talk about. They were supposed to be able to kill black men with impunity. And she spoke out about it, even though she had gone through terrible things in her life as well. She still felt a need to basically talk about some of the things that were going on in a massive way down south to basically subjugate a whole race of people. Okay, so let's move on here. She says, if you're also lynching black women, basically that basically it was somehow about sex. I disagree. They didn't care. They got whoever they got, and if they did something to a black woman, it was even more horrific act committed in order to subjugate all parties involved: men, women, children, everyone. We'll do this to your men, but we'll also do this to your women if you're not careful. But I think these people miss the rationale for doing what these people did. Okay, and then they get into intersectionality. You can't have a subject about black men and women without some form of intersectionality being brought in. Our famous term, that catch-all term, that basically is the main tool to basically shave off resources and any focus off of the most needy, meaning black men and boys, which historically the data has shown that black men and boys are the ones who needed the help the most in order to take their rightful place as husbands in the community, community leaders, all of the things that are necessary for the women to respect you in the community. And I know people are they're gonna bemoan my position on that, but look, all you have to do is just look and see what all the women are saying right now as to why you are not a viable candidate to be a husband and or a boyfriend or a person who dates them, and it's all about money, resources, your leadership capabilities, how you look physically, if you have the physical look of a leader, all of those things. But they'll try to convince you that is inconsequential to the argument. But listen closely. Okay, so we go back to, let's see, the next thing I found. Us being characterized as fiends and brutes. Well, they also categorize the women as fiends and brutes also. And another topic that we hear all the time is that women were not allowed to work and they weren't allowed to have money and all of these things. But I'm going to show you something right here. Right here in this section right here, in this paragraph here, it says, all right, where she talks about the intersectionality explains how factors including race, gender, and class are connected when it comes to discrimination. Okay, and then she goes down further to say they don't have whiteness. And whiteness was, I guess, something that they needed. Well, no, I don't guess, but that's what you would need to have protection against some of these atrocities being committed. They also don't have a higher socioeconomic status for which to protect them from death or the humiliation of sexual assault. She goes on to say, okay, so she talks about women's roles. She also noted that Black women's roles played in some of the accusations. Black women are typically working as domestics, okay? And so they stood accused of poisonings, murders, thefts, and thefts in the household. Okay, so that stands to go against everything that women say today to basically as a reason or rationale for why they should have all of these extra things today, more money than men, more status than men, all these things. Well, these Black women have always worked. They've always worked as domestics in the home, you know. So when it came time for white women to work, guess who taught them how to work? Because mostly, especially upper class white women, were also stay-at-home moms, but they didn't do any of the work in the homes because they had Black women to do it for them. The same things as far as going out and working as secretaries and all those things, they had Black women to do that. You know, they had Black women out working because they forced them to work. And there's plenty of documentation out here where basically if Black women did not have to work, and they said they weren't going to work, then they were forced. They were told, if you do not go out here and perform these domestic duties for these white women, for them to be able to be young, fresh, and ready for their husbands when they get home, then basically we'll run you out of town. And this happened in the Carolinas, all throughout the South, especially when Black women were getting pensions from their disabled and husbands who were killed in war. They didn't necessarily have to. They had money coming in from the government, so they didn't necessarily have to work as hard as other women, if at all. So what they would do is that they would take things from them or force them to work anyway. So there you have that. So that dispels one of the myths about them Black women not being able to work and not having money. Also, white women had accounts. You know, they had property. The book "They Were Her Property" deals with white women having property in the form of slaves. Slaves were the first form of money in this country. Don't believe me? Look it up. Okay, so it's all there. This depiction of being fiends and brutes. Yeah, they talk about this being placed on women. However, this was a commonly used trope for Black men, and gave them, all the cause they needed to kill you at any given time. There are stories and other historical references about Black men being told by young children to what are you doing around here? Get off this land, or get off this property, go home, whatever the case may be, get away from here. And if that Black man didn't do what that child said, they were murdered and lynched on the spot. So even a white child had more authority than a Black man. When you hear these people out here on YouTube, some of these women, and even on Facebook and whatnot, you hear these women talking about, we were conquered, and how why would anyone want to be with someone, a conquered man, when, the alpha is clearly the white male. These are the tropes that are being thrown out there for us without any regard for the historical sacrifices that we men have made. Okay. All right, let's go down here where they basically use the shaming, to basically tell these men after this young lady was lynched that here it is where they talk about, where 150 people, were there in this lynching. And basically, the black folks that were there were allowed to fire a shotgun blast into her in order to get it over with, to ease her suffering, to put her out of her misery. Okay, out of that 150 people, they reported that there were 30 Negroes there in attendance watching, and they would have been the people who would have been permitted if permission was given to fire and kill their community, a person of their community, their family member, whatever the case may be. They would be the one to fire that shot. I've never heard that regarding any black male being put out of his misery. We were always burned to a crisp, hung until dead, dismembered, photos taken of us, all manner of atrocities were committed against these men during their suffering and after their deaths. So you have that. There are postcards all over the place, all kinds of stuff that documents this. It's atrocious, and for any sector of people to this day to sit up and try to minimize the suffering that black men endured for the sake of their community, because one could make the argument that if the 30 groups of people, the group of 30 people did, do something, to stop this, they would have killed even more people. If one person wasn't allowed to be sacrificed for the greater good of all these other people, and I hate to even put it in that perspective, that they would have went out and massacred the entire community. But we know that they would have done that because they've done it time and time again. So, but this is what was demanded. Okay. So here you have where where she talks about here it is right here, where the one of the African American publications, basically the Appeal, criticized the African Americans who were there, saying it was a shame and a disgrace to the race that they failed to give their lives to stop the lynching of one of their women. Okay, we see some of the same rhetoric being characterized today for things that that have happened that are less than what was happening then. Now, how do I feel about that? I feel like, hey, I can say all day from the comfort of my chair here in front of this microphone that, that they should have fought to the last man to protect that woman. Do I think it would have done any good? No. I think initially, yeah, it might have done something. But as soon as the white folks get themselves together and regroup, it would have been the same situation as what happened on Black Wall Street. They would have burned the place to the ground, killed everybody that they found, and there would have been less of us here today. So there you have it. I mean, there's you have your proof as to how this thing would have played out if anything happened other than what happened. Let's see the reasons for lynching. Let's go through that a little bit. I think I talked about that a little bit. Or basically anything where you were doing something that was considered to be above your station, you were immediately dealt with, and in public, in front of everyone. Okay. So I won't spend any more on that. That's kind of where I got, and we know, Crenshaw is just, she goes through her part. Well, let's go through that. Crenshaw says that basically there is no frame. These women's names have slipped through our consciousness because there are no frames for us to see them. no frames for us to remember them, no frames for us to hold them. This is a bunch of sensationalism, as if no one cared about the suffering of these women. And I think for her to say that is disingenuous. Is this same rhetoric being used to characterize, our ability to recognize the suffering of the boys who are found on the side of roads in shallow graves, the ones who were hung, all manner of things. We don't even talk about the castrations and things that happened frequently. And these numbers are the numbers that they choose to show you. A lot of the numbers of people, we're going back 1865, 1965. I would dare say that those numbers are greater. And I would say that also those lynchings went up to as far as I would say the 80s. I'd say about mid to late 80s. Yeah. Those same types of things were still happening in the South. You dare not be in the wrong place at the wrong time still. So let's move on to the next one. I don't want to ramble too much. Okay. Here's the next one. And this was from the Innocence Project. Here we go.
From Emmett Till to Purvis Paine, Black men in America are still killed for crimes they didn't commit. Updated on August 5, 2020 at 5 p.m. E.T. On July 30th, Shelby County District Attorney Amy Wyrick announced that her office is opposing DNA testing of evidence in Purvis Paine's case. Wyrick also said that evidence presented to Paine's legal team in 2019, previously referred to in this article as hidden evidence, is actually from another case and was shown to Paine's team in error. This article has been updated to reflect this new information. Emmett Till, a young black boy in Mississippi, turned 14 on July 25, 1955. Almost exactly 1 month later, he was brutally murdered after being accused of sexually harassing Carolyn Bryant, a white woman, in a grocery store. Till would have turned 79 today had he not been killed. The two white men accused of his murder were later found not guilty by an all-white, all-male jury. 4 months after the trial, which took place in a segregated courtroom, the two men admitted to kidnapping and murdering Till in an interview with Look magazine. Because they had already been acquitted, they could not be tried again. Neither ever served time for Till's death. 6 decades later, Bryant admitted that she had lied and that the parts of her accusation considered most incendiary at the time, that Till had grabbed her and made verbal and physical advances on her, were untrue. Bryant has never faced any legal consequences for her accusations against Till. The FBI opened a reinvestigation into his murder 3 years ago. Till's story of injustice might have been lost to history if his mother, Mamie Till Mobley, hadn't insisted that the world take notice of her son. When Till's body was found in the Tallahatchie River days after the teen had been abducted from his great-uncle's house, it was unrecognizable. His great-uncle was only able to identify his body, disfigured from being beaten, shredded with barbed wire, shot, and thrown in the river, by his father's initial ring, which he still had on his finger. "Let the people see what they did to my boy," Till Mobley said when she saw her son's body. She insisted on an open casket for his funeral so that the public would have to contend with the heinous crime carried out against her son and so many other Black Americans throughout history. Related, read Mamie Till Mobley's book The Death of Innocence. More than 4,700 people were lynched in the United States between 1882 and 1968, according to the NAACP. The vast majority were Black, while many of the white victims of lynching were killed for helping Black people, advocating for their rights, or for speaking up against the lynching of Black people. Though Till's story has not been forgotten, such racism and inequality persist today and contribute to injustice in the legal system and beyond. From the Scottsboro boys, who were wrongly convicted of raping 2 white women, to the exonerated 5 to Christopher Cooper, The man a white woman falsely told police had threatened her life in May. Black and brown men in America have continued to be perceived as dangerous, violent, and hypersexual. The harmful and racist stereotypes of black men as predators has contributed to black men being incarcerated at higher rates and to wrongful conviction. Let the people see what they did to my boy. These are the same kind of racist stereotypes that the prosecution in Provis Payne's case evoked at trial to convict him of murder. Payne, who has an intellectual disability, has spent 32 years facing execution in Tennessee for a crime he has always said he did not commit. And DNA testing of evidence in his case could help prove this. The Innocence Project jointly filed a petition for DNA testing on July 22. Payne was convicted for the 1987 murder of Sharice Christopher and her child in Millington, Tennessee. The prosecution argued that Payne had been searching for sex after using drugs and looking at a Playboy magazine, and that he attacked Christopher after he made an advance on her and she rejected him. But no evidence supports this theory. Though Payne's mother begged law enforcement to administer a drug test to her son to prove that he had not been using drugs, they refused. Payne had no history of drug use, no criminal record, and was not known to be violent. In fact, those who know him describe him as a kind and respectful man, who liked to make his family laugh and help out at his father's church. Read more, 8 Things You Need to Know About Provis Payne's Case. But the prosecution painted a very different picture, making Payne out to be a violent and hypersexual drug user. And, at trial, the prosecutor repeatedly pointed out the victim's white skin when referring to parts of her body. A poignant reminder of her whiteness in a county ranked among the 25 counties with the most recorded lynchings between 1877 and 1950, according to the Equal Justice Initiative.
Okay. I guess it cut off then, but the article goes on to say in the late 1800s, claims that black men had had committed sexual assault or made sexual advances on white women were frequently cited to justify their lynchings, historians say. That in reality, many sexual assault accusation claims were false and were often used as a cover for consensual relationships that were at the time extremely taboo. And racist beliefs were so deeply seated among white communities that whites could not countenance the idea of a white woman desiring sex with a black person. Thus, any physical relationship between a white woman and a black man had, by definition, to be unwanted assault, writes historian Philip Dre. Okay, the perception of black men as a danger to white women, in particular contributing to false accusations like the ones lobbied against Till and the Scottsboro Boys, is deeply rooted in the history and the legacy of slavery. In Louisiana, for instance, sexual assault was only considered a crime when the victim was a white woman, according to the American Bar Association. And capital punishment was a mandatory punishment for sexual assault and attempted sexual assault only when the alleged attacker was a slave or a black man. Okay. All righty. So this is a part of another this case, and it shows some of the same. There's a case that is here that was more recent, and then you go back and you look at the historical implications that are relevant to that. Okay, so let's move on to the next one. And this is a bar graph of lynchings here. And I'll let that one go ahead and read for you.
Bar graph of lynchings of African Americans. 1890 to 1929 middle dot check, resources for teachers. Bar graph of lynchings of African Americans, 1890 to 1929. From 1890 to 1900, an average of 175 African Americans were lynched each year. Lynchings were attacks motivated by racism where white mobs brutally murdered black victims, sometimes in the night, but often in a public way with many witnesses. Lynch mobs often hung their victims, but also sometimes burned or tore apart the victim's body. African American men were the most common targets of lynch mobs, but women were also hurt and killed. White public officials in the South did not criticize lynching, did not punish those responsible, and often supported the actions of lynch mobs. African Americans, most notably the journalist Ida B. Wells, fought back against lynching by trying to bring national attention to the issue. View high resolution. Across the South, someone was hanged or burned alive every 4 days from 1889 to 1929, according to the 1933 book The Tragedy of Lynching, for such alleged crimes as stealing hogs, horse stealing, poisoning mules, jumping labor contract, suspected of stealing cattle, boastful remarks or trying to act like a white man. One was killed for stealing 75 cents. Like the cotton growing in the field, violence had become so much a part of the landscape that perhaps most of the Southern black population had witnessed a lynching in their own communities or knew people who had, wrote the historian Herbert Shapiro. All blacks lived with the reality that no black individual was completely safe from lynching. Isabel Wilkerson, The Warmth of Other Suns, The Epic Story of America's Great Migration.
Okay. So there you have another perspective on the lynching of black men and the reasons for it. Okay. You have people stealing, accused of stealing hogs and horses and things like that. And we know that some of this was, people were starving during that time. So to steal a hog to feed your family because you were being starved out due to lack of work or whatever the case may be, or work with wages that were not adequate for you to be able to care for a family, is what people fell upon. Or and there are cases where people were forced to sell livestock and horses and whatnot, even though they didn't want to sell them, or they needed them to survive. So they would say that the horse was stolen, or the horse belonged to them, even though they didn't sell it, or whatever the case may be. But all of those would still end up with that person who did not comply being dead. So today we have this lack of compassion for the circumstances under which these black men lived, these black families lived. Any woman during that time who respected her husband, her father, her uncles, and all of that, they are demonized and treated with a total lack of respect for the difficulty of their circumstances. So this article again goes into that and shows you the toll that this took on black men and boys. Okay, so there's another article I will add in the comments that talks about Ida B. Wells and her concerns about it, and that's here. I am not, not paying for that. So here's another paper that is used, an analytical history of black female lynchings in the United States from 1838 to 1969. And this has some great information in there. If you care to read it, it's very long, so I'm not going to make you suffer through that, but I thought that may be of some use. Okay, here is statistics by state on how many lynchings took place during the time period, and they have white people and black people who were lynched during the same time. Okay, so, and those are the total numbers. So there you have it, by state. Okay. Now, I want you to compare that to this. All righty.
Police Shootings Database 2015 to 2022. In 2015, The Washington Post began to log every fatal shooting by an on-duty police officer in the United States. In that time there have been more than 5,000 such shootings recorded by the Post. Jump to the database. After Michael Brown, an unarmed black man, was killed in 2014 by police in Ferguson, Missouri, a Post investigation found that the FBI undercounted fatal police shootings by more than half. This is because reporting by police departments is voluntary and many departments fail to do so. The Post's data relies primarily on news accounts, social media postings and police reports. Analysis of more than 5 years of data reveals that the number and circumstances of fatal shootings and the overall demographics of the victims have remained relatively constant. Rate of shootings remains steady. Despite the unpredictable events that lead to fatal shootings, police nationwide have shot and killed almost the same number of people annually, nearly 1,000, since the Post began its project. Probability theory may offer an explanation. It holds that the quantity of rare events in huge populations tends to remain stable absent major societal changes, such as a fundamental shift in police culture or extreme restrictions on gun ownership. 0, 200, 400, 600, 800, 1,000 total shootings January, February, March, April, May, June, July, August, September, October, November, December, January, February, March, April, May, June, July, August, September, October, November, December 2022 653 2016 958 2017 981 2018 993 2015 994 201999 20201 020 2021 1055. Black Americans are killed at a much higher rate than white Americans. Although half of the people shot and killed by police are white, Black Americans are shot at a disproportionate rate. They account for less than 13% of the U.S. population, but are killed by police at more than twice the rate of white Americans. Hispanic Americans are also killed by police at a disproportionate rate. The rate at which Black Americans are killed by police is more than twice as high as the rate for white Americans. 1,674 killed, total. 1,127 killed, 3,180 killed, 256 killed, 42 M39 M197 M49 M Black 40 per million, Hispanic 29 per million, White 16 per million, other 5 per million. U.S. population higher rate of police killings. Most victims are young, male. An overwhelming majority of people shot and killed by police are male, over 95%. More than half the victims are between 20 and 40 years old. Victims by age 510 to 45 to 910 to 14 15 to 19 20 to 24 25 to 29 30 to 34 35 to 39 40 to 44 45 to 49 50 to 54 55 to 59 60 to 64 65 to 69 70 to 74 75 to 79 80 to 84 85 plus 0 100 200 300 400 500 600 700 800 900 1000 1100 1200 1300 Victims by gender 7,290 344 male-female. Shootings happen across the country. Police shootings have taken place in every state and have occurred more frequently in cities where populations are concentrated. States with the highest rates of shootings are New Mexico, Alaska, and Oklahoma. Each circle on the map below marks the location of a deadly shooting. Shootings per million people 079 high LRACACOCT the FLGA ya IDE LIN KSKY LAMAMD MIMI MNMO Mount NCND NHNJNMNVNYOO.
All right. Yeah, we're going to stop at that. That's every one of the states, and there's a searchable database with the records here. I will put all of that in the description. All right. I put all of that down to say, let me get out of here. And come on back down. I say all of that to say that when you hear all of these comparisons to Black women and LGBTQ people and all of this, and I just want you to know that this is basically a way to segment and to stratify the situation to a point to where all of the resources that will be going towards the most needy in these situations is being pulled off and stripped, stolen, and rediverted to other smaller communities with lesser needs that are basically shown to be or categorized or miscategorized as being of greater need. But the numbers don't show that. There is no greater need for representation for anybody other than the usual suspects, which has been Black men and boys since the 1930s, even before the 1930s. This also covers, a lot of other different topics that I've gone through regarding this terraforming of history in order to make you focus more on the grievances of other people who make up anywhere from 7% to 0.4% of the population that needs to be addressed in some of these things. So, I could have put up the numbers of people who are, who are, murdered and whatnot. But if you go through and you look at those numbers and you look at the numbers in comparison to the numbers of, well, some of those numbers were there. There are Black males still make up the largest number of people who are murdered, killed by the police, across the board, dying early, all across the board. Educational needs are there, Black men and boys. The need for jobs, Black men and boys. The need for protection, Black men and boys. But the all of the resources are being redirected towards Black women, Black women, female feminist agendas, LGBTQ people of color agendas, and not towards the people who actively need it the most. And our jobs as the men in this community, our jobs are plain and simple. We have to shine a light on the need and where these resources need to go. There's a lot of talk of not voting for Democrats and voting Republican and whatnot, and you're basically advocating for people to go and vote for a group of people who have made you no promises. And the people who have made you promises, you have to hold them accountable. And if you don't hold them accountable, then what you need to do is en masse, like I said in every one of my videos, I'm going to continue to say it. En masse, Black men need to go to the Democratic National Committee and make our demands known. This is what we're going to vote for. If you do not vote, if you do not, support these agendas and these issues, then we will bail. We will not support you. And we all will stand on that together. If we do that, then that's one of the only ways that we're going to gain some sense of political power and take the first steps towards regaining control of our communities, or gaining for the first time control of our communities, and obtaining the resources to do what has been advocated ever since the Monahan Report, the Kerner Commission, and even before that with Frazier's work and Clark's work. So, I guess I about covered it. I hope this was interesting. Please like, share, and subscribe. Please hit that notification button in order for YouTube to respect me amongst the great entities of the algorithm. So I appreciate everyone listening and watching. I apologize for my earlier recording where there was no audio. So I had to go in and fix my settings. For some reason, they don't lock in. My apologies. So thank you guys for sticking around. Thanks for all the support you guys give me. And thanks for helping me grow my channel. I appreciate it. Anything that you guys, any information that you would like for me to review or cover, I would be glad to. Thank you guys for all the support in the comments. I enjoy reading some of the information that I receive in the comments. That is, it's some great stuff that some of you guys have shared with me, and I appreciate it. And with that, I bid you farewell.
I feel like a motherless child, a long way from home.